5 News, our top story tonight. The country is heading for recession as the latest figures show the economy shrank in the third quarter of this year.
Economists are now eagerly anticipating the Chancellor's budget next week, saying what Jeremy Hunt does will now impact how long that recession lasts. Well, Mr. Hunt admitted he'll have to make eye-watering decisions. Joining us now to talk about this and to try and analyse and say what the future looks like is a big question, isn't it? Financial analyst Danni Hewson joins us live on 5 News. Thank you so much, Danni, for being with us. And we're going to go through some of our comments and viewers' messages we've had sent through the programme tonight. But let's start with a sort of general picture. What have you made of those GDP figures, and what should all our viewers be thinking about tonight with that in mind?
I wasn't at all surprised by the GDP figures. We were expecting that there would be a slowdown, and in fact, the slowdown wasn't quite as big as many economists were predicting. So that's a little bit of good news. However, September's figures were particularly stark. Now, although the Office for National Statistics says that about 0.3% of the 0.6% fall is probably down to the bank holiday, which happened because, of course, of the Queen's funeral, which saw businesses and schools closed, which meant a lot of parents couldn't work. That's not the only issue here. Fundamentally, the economy is slowing down. We are a consumer economy. And of course, what's happening at the moment is people just don't have as much money to spend. The money isn't going as far. So even if they're spending the same amount, they're not buying the same amount of stuff. That is impacting businesses. It's impacting services, particularly consumer-facing services. You know, people like hairdressers, people just aren't going as often as they once did. They're trying to make a cut last, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, going back to the old lockdown methods just to try and make their money stretch a bit further.
Yeah, we were hearing earlier in the programme in one report, Danni, how exactly your example there are barbers where they need to find an extra 30% of people coming through the door just to make ends meet.
Yeah, because you've got to remember as well that businesses have been really struggling the last couple of years. We had COVID lockdown, and even this time last year, there was lots of discussion. Will there be a lockdown? Won't there be a lockdown? People were expecting a really good Christmas to try and make up some of the shortfalls, and it didn't happen in many cases. So a lot of retailers, service providers had been hoping that this would be the magic golden period. Of course, people now are incredibly worried about their cash. So consumer confidence is down, they're spending less, but also these businesses are also being hit with rising costs. So it's a double whammy for them.
Danni, we've been asking our viewers to tell us about their concerns on the 5 phone. I wonder if I should read you some now. 3 from very different people, different concerns. Beverly from Wales says, I work in a supermarket and there's talk of them doing just self-scan, which means that the cashiers are going to probably be made redundant. So that's really worrying. Avtar from Birmingham is a landlord. He said, I'm not actually worried for myself, but I am for my tenants, and I've told them to speak to me if they find themselves struggling, and we'll try and get through this together. And then there's Will, who says, I'm actually a small business. I'm offering free gas and electric repairs and upgrades to support disabled customers. I just don't think my business can rely on charitable donations now, as fewer people are contributing, understandably so. This really is affecting people across the board, isn't it?
It is affecting people across the board. And of course, what happens in a recession, and we are heading towards a recession, I know technically it's 2 consecutive quarters. So even though the UK economy might well be in recession for 6 months, we won't actually get the label put on it until January. We know in our hearts, we know in our pockets that a recession is definitely on the cards. So, yeah, there is a real fear that investment is going to disappear, that all those businesses that were maybe thinking of taking on extra staff are now thinking about the opposite, about having to cut staff. We've had the announcement of job cuts in some major tech businesses just over the last week or so. And also we saw a retailer, Made.com, going into administration. So Although the employment situation is still incredibly bright, although there is still a large number of vacancies out there, the Bank of England has already said that it expects unemployment to double over this period of time. There are a huge number of uncertainties out there. There are an awful lot of people really worried about making ends meet, about making their businesses keep the lights on this winter. And of course, as we're heading in towards Christmas, we're all thinking hard about how much money we spend on gifts, which people we buy for. There's a lot of advice out there saying, cut back, maybe make a pact with family and friends to only spend just a little bit.
Okay.
And that's great for the consumer, but clearly for businesses, it's tricky.
Danni, thank you very much for that. I was going to ask you about unemployment figures, but you explained that in your final answer. Really good to talk to you. You've covered everything, as ever. Pleasure to have you on 5 News. Thank you very much.